So I wanted to do a really quick video just to talk about poor reference photos. I think they are the bane of portrait artists' life, to be honest. I have had a bit of a run of poor photos. This is the third one that I've had. Some, when people say poor, some are like really, really poor, like a black dog that's just a blob. You know, this particular one that I want to show you at the moment, actually, it's not that bad, but it's not a good photo, and it's a shame because it's a lovely subject. So I've got the photograph in Photoshop. I've pulled in the photograph that I was sent, and you can see that it is very small. It's at 100%. So if I start to blow it up, it starts to go pixelated. So I need to be drawing it around this size so you can see it's pixelated. You can't see any of the hair detail, you can't really see any of the eyes, but you know, it's not the worst photograph in the world. You can still do something with it. Now I use the Adobe products, so I use Photoshop and I use Lightroom, and I know not everybody does, and there are some free products that you can use that are similar. One of them is GIMP. You just download it, and it's got, I want to say it's got similar functions to Photoshop. It has got similar functions to Photoshop, but it is really, really complicated to use, or I find it really complicated to use. I would say if you've got budget, the photography bundle that you can get with Adobe is something like $9 a month, and it's really worth it if you're going to be using your own photography or other people's photography, because you can do an awful lot with them. So with a photograph like this, I'm going to be drawing it as a 10 by 12, so actually it'll probably be a little bit smaller, a 10 by 12 portrait. I can see the colours, I can see the form, I can kind of see what the eyes are doing. Oh gosh, that's gone up to 1200%, so that really is. So it's not horrendous. What I would look at doing is I would look at tweaking the colours very slightly, and I would look at maybe lightening it up a little bit. And you can lighten up in all sorts of different ways, just using the curves in Photoshop. And this isn't a lesson in Photoshop, but I just want to show you when you lighten something up, you can start to see very, very we can start to see in the shadows a little bit more, and that can kind of help you. And what I tend to do is have a really blown out image like this, so with the really, so you can see into the deepest shadows, and I do this with good photographs as well. And then I'll create another one with underexposed, not that underexposed, but underexposed, so that you can see a little bit of detail into the white as well, so you're not losing that. So I'll work with 3 images. That's what I do all of the time with all of my imagery. With this particular one, I would now look at Googling a rough collie and try and find something that's similar to this particular pose, and that's what I would do with any poor reference. I'd Google and see if I can find something that's a similar pose. So we'll just go into Chrome. So I'd Google something like rough collie. Oops. We'll look at images, and we're just going to go through and sort of find one that's maybe a similar pose or a similar colour. Even if it's not quite, well, that's quite a small photo as well. Let's have a look. That looks like it could be not the best photograph. Let's have a look, see if we can view more on there. So that one looks quite a good one. Oh, that one looks quite a good one. That one actually, if I look in Photoshop, that one, the eyes could be helpful. So we can, what I'm not telling you to do is copy something exactly. What I am suggesting is that you find something to help you with your drawing. So something like this. So if I just save this image and we come into Photoshop. Okay. So those eyes are quite clear, and they wouldn't be such a bad match for this one that we're doing. You know, you could kind of use these to get the detail around them for this area here. So basically that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be searching through, finding images that are going to help you. You're never going to find one that's exactly the same, and you can sit for hours and hours and hours looking for reference photos and never find. That's quite a nice one as well, actually. So Pinterest is quite a good, but you've also got to try and find one that's see, this one will be quite good, although it's not a very high-res photo. You need to find one that you can have a look at the fur detail and get some of this fur detail in for when you do this ruff here. This one might be quite good for the nose area, and I know it seems like a real faff, and actually that one would be quite good for the teeth as well. And I don't think really that we'd have issues with copyright, because what we're doing is we're just looking at something, not copying it exactly, but just looking at something and having that image to help us create what it is that we've got in front of us, but we can't see the detail of. That's all we're doing really. This nose, again, that nose can help, if you want to add some detailing in there as well. So do some Googling, find some photos that are similar to what you're using. And then with a piece like this, because you can't see the detail, you're going to be using other images to sort of help you a little bit, but you're still not going to be able to create the most amazing piece from a photograph like this, even if you are using others to help you. What I would suggest is forget tiny details. Obviously you need to get the eyes right, you need to get the nose right, but you can go for a more painterly feel, and for that to work, all you need to do is just get your lights and your darks right. So get your darks really dark, your lights really light, get the form of the animal, which you can see in this photo, and then it will work okay. It's never going to be your best piece. You're always going to be frustrated when you're working with a poor quality photograph, and it's always going to be challenging moving and working from different photographs. So I suppose it's a decision that a lot of people have made not to take on poor references. I do take them on, and sometimes they work okay, and sometimes honestly I can lose the will to live because they're just awful. I've never had a client be unhappy with a portrait from a poor reference. They've always been over the moon. But I think if you are going to take on poor reference photos, I think to caveat when you're talking to your client initially, I think it's a really good idea just to let them know that because you're working from a poor photograph, you aren't going to be able to get the level of detail that you would normally get in your portraits, and that they have to understand that your style probably isn't going to come through as much on using a photograph like this. And I think as long as you're completely upfront with the client, and even say, actually I'm not happy working with the poor reference, that's absolutely okay to do, and I know a lot of people do that. My feeling is that if you do work from poor photos, I think that your drawing skills actually develop, because you're not relying on, and I don't want to sound awful or anything like that, but you're not relying on copying a photo. You know, you've got to put something else in there, and you've got to understand how the hair works and the eyes work and all that type of stuff. So you've got to have some form of understanding to be able to, you know, work from a poor reference. And I think it's a really, really good exercise to do, but it is frustrating. So yeah, so just to recap, poor photo, Google. You know, you can Google dogs' noses, you can Google dogs' eyes, you can Google the colour of the dog, you can Google the breed of the dog. Don't spend hours and hours, because you'll never ever find the exact, you know, replica of your photograph. And lighten up your darkest areas. If you've got a really dark photo, lighten it up so you can see inside the where the darkest shadows are. And make a decision, you know, as to whether you actually want to work from a poor reference photo, or whether you know, would prefer to refuse to do portraits from a poor photograph. So I hope that's useful. It's probably a lot of me gabbling on, but it's don't worry about using Google. You know, there's no copyright infringement, because you're not copying something exactly, you're just using it as a guide.